One of the main reasons I wanted to start my own online business many years ago was to be able to take time off. Don't get me wrong, I like to work. When you love what you do and are genuinely helping people, it can be hard not to work on it. But freedom is also so important. And my family and I are about to do something kind of crazy, kind of not normal. We're taking the kids out of school for a semester, buying an RV, and hitting the road for 5 months. Where are we going? What's the plan? And how am I going to manage my businesses while away? That's what we're talking about today. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Online Course Show, where we dive deep into the strategies and tools that help online course creators build thriving businesses. I'm Jacques Hopkins, and over the past 11 years, I've built a successful online course business teaching piano that's brought in over $4 million, and I'm here to share the lessons I've learned along the way. My wife and I have always been fascinated by the idea of traveling around the country in an RV. We used to dream of doing this when we were both working full-time as engineers. And I remember even going to an RV show in New Orleans when my oldest daughter was a baby, and she's 9 years old now. It just never really worked out. Well, we actually did try it once very briefly. Back in the summer of 2020, we planned a big road trip to several national parks, and we rented a truck camper, which is where you have a small camper basically sitting in the bed of a pickup truck. We went this route because at the time our kids were, I think, 2 and 4, and we really needed a safe place for them to travel with car seats. And this setup allowed us to put them in the back seat of the truck. The problem is, it turned out to be very small for our family of 4, and also the one we rented had several problems. So long story short, we returned it after just one night in Zion National Park, and we switched to just renting an SUV and staying in hotels and cabins instead. Still an amazing trip, we'll never forget it, but it wasn't in an RV. This time, we purchased our own camper. It's a travel trailer, so we pull it behind our family car. We'll all ride down the road in our car while pulling the camper. The plan is to be on the road around 4.5 months. We'll visit 13 national parks, as well as many other places in the United States. I could talk about this trip all day, but the main thing I want to talk about here is how I'm able to do this while running my online businesses. So first of all, despite the title, I'm not working for 5 months. I'll be away from my studio office for nearly 5 months, and I won't be working nearly as much as normal, but I will be working. My normal work weeks at home now are around 30 hours a week, and here's how that typically breaks down on a given week. About 15 hours is for content creation, so creating these podcast episodes or working on content inside my programs. About 5 hours a week is working with my clients inside of my coaching programs. Another 5 hours is spent on processing my inboxes, so that's mostly email, but it's other inboxes as well. I'll share that with you in a little bit. Then about 3 hours a week working with my team, and about 2 hours a week working on just what I would call CEO activities, just the really high-level strategy stuff, the direction of the business, and so on. The biggest change in my normal schedule versus my on-the-road schedule is I'm completely eliminating content creation, which was about half of my normal week. I'm not doing podcast interviews, I'm not going to be doing solo podcasts, and I'm not going to be doing YouTube videos. Why? Well, first of all, because I won't have my studio with all my cameras and lighting. And secondly, because I batched everything before the trip, so my brand won't miss a beat, and we will be releasing just as much content, if not more, while away from home. So we currently have all of our content planned out through May, including this episode you're listening to right now. This episode came out in January, but I actually recorded it in November. Being able to get this far ahead with content, I attribute to great systems. I say this quote all the time, but it really is my favorite. It's from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. We've been planning this trip for a long time now. So the first thing that I didn't do to prepare was just crank out a bunch of content. The first thing I did was improve my content creation system. So first of all, me and my team looked at the time we spent on various platforms versus the results we get on those platforms and made strategic decisions to eliminate some and double down on others. We then optimized our roles, making it very clear who was responsible for what. Then I improved my own systems here in my office with things like a new teleprompter that is really fancy and nice that I can load scripts into from my computer, and it also auto tracks my voice so it goes at the right speed for what I'm saying, and also new proven frameworks for the content that I make. And that's probably the key takeaway I want you to get from this episode. Abraham Lincoln said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." So before I attempted to chop down this tree as I prepared for our big trip, I spent time sharpening the axe, and it's paid off big time. Let me give you a specific example. Here's my system for a solo podcast episode like this one. You can take this and apply it to other platforms as well. It doesn't have to be a podcast. One of the reasons I've historically not done many solo episodes is because I didn't have a good system. It was a lot of work and I wasn't confident in my approach. Now I follow a proven framework and system. So let me tell you about it now. So step 1 is ideation. I've made ideation part of my regular process, meaning coming up with ideas. On a weekly basis, I follow the PQRS framework. So first of all, problems. The P is for problems. What problems did you solve for yourself or for your clients this week? Number 2 is questions. What questions did you answer for your clients or for your audience this week? 3 is realizations. What realizations did you have this week? And 4 is stories. That's the S. What stories did you encounter? This allows me to keep a running list of good ideas for podcast episodes and other content. For example, for this very episode you're listening to right now, I had a realization, the R there, that it would be good to talk about stepping outside of my home office for nearly 5 months and the impact that that would have on my business. Step 2 is to script out the episode using the hook, story, and lesson or framework. This framework is simple, but an absolute game changer. For all of my solo episodes, I simply write a compelling hook. This hooks the listener in emotionally by either calling out pain points or relating to them. It poses a question the episode will answer and creates an open loop that keeps you curious and wanting more. This part also introduces me and the show and why I'm the perfect guide for you on this journey. Next is the story. Before we get to the real meat of the episode, you give a story about how you learned that thing or experienced that thing or a client experiencing that thing. In this episode, it was the story of my previous RV experiences and why they failed and why we're doing this one. And then the third and final part of this framework is the lesson or framework. We've done our hook, we've done our story. Now we have to bring it all home with massive value. Here's where we present the lesson or framework that this episode was all about, and we truly fulfill on the promises made in the title and the hook. So that's step 2 in this system. Script out the episode using the hook, story, and lesson or framework. In step 3 is where we bring in AI. Notice I didn't have AI write my script, but I find it's great for making improvements. What I do next is give ChatGPT my script and ask, do you have any suggestions for how this solo podcast episode could be improved? Is there anything missing that would be valuable? This allows me to make sure I didn't have any blinders on and provided maximum value for the audience. For example, my first version of this very script didn't include these 6 steps for my solo podcast process. ChatGPT suggested, this episode focuses heavily on your story and preparation, which is interesting, but consider explicitly tying the lessons to your audience's challenges or aspirations. Example, add a brief section outlining how your systems approach can apply to their course creation or other business aspects, even if they're not planning a long trip. So I took that advice and added in this very real and specific system that I actually use that I think you can get value out of. So we're talking about these steps right now, this system that I use to make a solo podcast episode. We've made it through 3 steps. Let's keep going with step 4, and that's to practice for flow. Once I have my script, I practice that script and make sure there's no holes there and that it's going to flow well for a podcast episode. In step 5, I load my now refined script into the teleprompter and I record the video. Now, I'm not 100% rigid with my script and I leave room to riff here and there. But using a teleprompter, I've been able to really dial in what I'm going to say, and that is a massive part of this system. And then the last step in my process, step 6, is to then submit it to my team. If you don't have a team working on this stuff with you, then there will be additional steps for you in your system. But the way I've set things up, that is my last part. I submit it to my team and they take care of the rest, from doing the video editing to reviewing it and actually getting it ready for publishing. So those are my 6 steps for solo episodes. Like I said, before I would rarely do solo episodes because it was just this ambiguous thing I didn't know how to do well. Now I have a system and we are releasing new ones every other week. More importantly, it allowed me to batch this content efficiently in preparation for the big trip. I'm going to be able to enjoy the time with my family more, knowing my business is going to continue to move forward. And while the kids are doing their homeschool, I can do my 10 to 15 hours of work per week and be fully present with them on this amazing trip the rest of the time. I know some of you are really into travel too, so I'll share some highlights that we're planning. We're going to be spending some time in the Florida Keys, where we'll swim with dolphins, we'll go snorkeling, and visit the Dry Tortugas National Park. We'll head out west and we'll do Big Bend, Joshua Tree, White Sands, Saguaro, Death Valley, Yosemite. We'll do Napa Valley and some bigger cities like Los Angeles and San Diego. We're obviously really looking forward to it, and I'll certainly report back at the end. That's going to do it for this episode. I'll be back next week with another interview-based show that I pre-recorded way ahead of time. If you haven't noticed, we started alternating back and forth between interview-based shows and solo episodes like this one. Let me know in the comments below if you like this change. We used to do just one interview-based show every 2 weeks. Now we do an episode every single week, alternating between the two formats. Leave a comment below and don't forget to take action on what you've heard today. Until next time, I'm rooting for you.